Alright, so I kind of wanted to do a 1 month progression video since I've started using Blender. Um, I decided to get a new PC with my stimulus money, and I was kind of hoping to be one of those people that would get quarantined, be at home, and have time to do some writing, some sketching, some storyboarding. That didn't happen, but I'm sticking with it, just kind of in my free time and here and there. Watching a lot of YouTube videos for instructionals, reading some community forums, um, but been using Blender, learning how to use the VSDC video editor and OBS Studios, which I'm recording this with. It was kind of a headache. I had the blank screen issue to where I had to switch the program to integrated graphics from the NVIDIA settings. So once I got that figured out, it's good to go. So I figured I would go ahead and do a little bit of a progression here on my first month of Blender. And so here we go with the bouncy ball tutorial, which I actually had started with the 3D part of Blender and was doing the donut tutorial. And I got a little frustrated with it in the end and decided to start using grease pencil. So I followed along several of the tutorials for just kind of beginning animation and went ahead and did a bit of a storyboard that I get rid of there, and you can just see what is supposed to be happening, bouncing from left to right. I didn't really use any in-betweening to where you would go from this point to this point and then to your high point and low point again. To make sure that you're ending up where you're supposed to, I just went along, and I was kind of in a rush as I was going back and forth from Windows, from YouTube to Blender, and pausing and playing. And so I did kind of rush this first project a bit and just wanted to get a feel for what it could do with the drawing. The sculpt mode, edit mode, and object mode have been what I've used pretty much exclusively, not really any of the vertex paint or weight paint yet. But this is the final sketch outline. You can get rid of the storyboard here and just had that little extra effect where it would bounce into two and track two objects at the same time, have it come back together. And then because I didn't do the in-betweening, it drops off over here from the level it was on. But, that could be fixed if you wanted to include a floor, just to place a line there and then a line there. And it looks like it would just be dropping it here and then rolling off. I came back later on with this one and decided to do the fills and just add the color. Nothing really special. I tried doing the fill and doing the lasso with, no, not that. Trying to do the lasso effect to where it would get the color to where it would stay in the lines and not extrude out of the lines. I had a little bit of trouble with that and decided to kind of move on, that I was happy with this project as it was. And I moved on to doing a sketch, kind of a draft sketch of a tree that kind of took off from there. And I wasn't really too sure what I was getting myself into. I was in sculpt mode and draw mode most of the time, using the push and the pull along with the smooth. I had started with just the tree and went from there to building a fire and adding a little bit of some plants here, some mushrooms, some rocks, and then kind of added to the root system a bit, and then decided to throw a character in there. And I just couldn't stop. I just kept going with the pushing and the pulling of each new frame, and just ended up getting to where I had a basic storyline or storyboard in mind here for what I wanted to accomplish in the end, to where the character now is going to pick these mushrooms, take them to the fire, and maybe pick these plants over here, put them on a pan and cook them. Um, I thought there would maybe be some clouds moving in, have it rain, try to do a new layer for the rain. That way I don't have to mess with any of the erasing and redrawing. I have so many lines over here. There was also an update that happened probably somewhere in the 60s of my frames. And I noticed that it changed the way that the lines in the eraser worked. So the old lines are still kind of the same physics or mechanics they were before the update. And trying to adjust and do newer lines with different kind of physics, it seems like, it just got a little frustrating. But as you can see, it's on a 3D plane here, even though it's just a 2D drawing. So my initial thoughts were to just select the character outline and then pull it back on the axis here, have it walk behind the tree to get to the fire, instead of having to erase and redraw. Even though the onion skinning is really nice, this feature here, it shows you what your previous frames were and what your next frame will be if you already have it done, which helps when you're doing some of the touching up, and it probably looks a little better in draw mode. It's a little more solid, and can refocus with the camera here. But this here we'll let play through, just kind of get a feel for what happened. I got bored of adding to the tree for the initial drawing and decided I would just have it grow, which is a really easy starting animation, having something grow to where you just add to the line or push or pull the line up a little bit more, like a flower or a tree. But I kind of gave up on this one and started moving on to other projects in Blender, involving some of the more 3D aspects of the program. And I started kind of doing this combination deal where you throw a plane down from your objects mode and a few cubes and make sure that those snap to your plane. And then you can, if I wanted to move the camera over to this building here, my drawing, I could then snap my drawing point to the building and start doing windows and windowsills, maybe some cracks or some broken bricks or whatever. Depends on what kind of building you're doing. Or I could keep it as a 3D object and just keep manipulating and adding on to these cubes here, just like you would in the 3D version of Blender as opposed to grease pencil. So it lets you cross some of that over to where I could render something in the 3D version and then import it to a 2D version and use it as part of my backdrop. Or if it was a character and it was pre-rigged, I could drop that in here too, which is something that I'm just kind of getting started with as I'm going through and learning. But I just wanted to get the basic feel for what this would be, and learned how to snap the camera to your viewpoint and move the camera around the scene. I didn't really get to where I animated anything. It was more of just a test project, but it kind of led me on to the next 2D, 3D combo project, which is just going to be my own lines. And I've got both, I want to say X and Z, no, X and Y axis here. Z is the top down, So I have the trees that I duplicated and then just kind of twisted them around. Um, what I would like to do in the end would be to take the tree, fully flesh it out, have kind of a top-down drawing where the branches would come off in every direction. Um, go back to this mode, maybe bring it up a bit, again, branch them out in other directions, sort of like what I've done with the terrain here. And then you can always connect these lines over here and fill that area, or you could make a plane and fill that area and then smooth it all out. It's one of the things I'm learning about Blender, and one of the things that has also made it so hard to learn is there's so many ways of getting to the final product that all the videos I've watched, I've kind of had to splice together different people's methods, and just I'm at about that point where I have enough knowledge to start figuring out my own way of doing it. But ideally, you would make one tree, which I just copied and I duplicated it and then moved it. The same for these. You would fully render them, get your color in there, get the sort of 3D aspect to the entire object, which I don't have done for those. Those are also just a 2D. But you would get your one object set and then select the whole thing, move it off of the screen, and kind of save it for later. Once you have all your other objects done, then you would go to your process of duplicating them and placing them on the landscape you've created, which is how I think I'm going to start going about this one instead of the way I have been. But I wanted to make a bit of a motion capture just to show like maybe an action scene here. And I was going to base it off of like an Elder Scrolls Online duel. And what I figured I would do is have a character kind of running and get ambushed by a Nightblade coming out of cloak and attacking, going back into stealth. And I didn't really go too much farther from there, just kind of want some sort of idea what I'm doing, but at the same time, I would like to have the background all the way done to where these characters would be moving three-dimensionally through the space and around these objects, instead of just a 3D environment with a 2D fight scene in front of them. So I'll have to work on how I kind of flesh out this motion capture part of it, just the rough of it. But that's a project I'll probably be coming back to again, and maybe I might restart it or I might continue from here. I'm not sure yet. I had started doing a couple of color tests in making materials and decided I just kind of modeled the character from the tree draft with the cloak and the backpack. And just kind of got used to what the color scheme would be on a single panel or a single layer here. So I ended up pulling the lines away from the cloak, and you can see it's still, the color doesn't always follow the lines, especially if it's two different frames or layers. So I just kind of got used to how the fill works in draw mode over here. To the paint bucket. Your leak size is by default really small, and I turned that up quite a ways on some of the projects I did, and I couldn't figure out how to get the color to work. This would be one of those, where I took a Venture Brothers character here and just decided to start doing a little bit of color. Just a hair and skin color for the most part. One of the issues that I was having, though, is I would do a fill and it would block all the facial detail out. So I realized that I had to go to my fills, and instead of regular blend, it needs to be in multiply. And my leak size, like I said in the previous one, it was at 3 there. I'll put it to 5, to where it was at 30, it wouldn't hardly fill anything in. We'll select the skin that we created, and there's a couple of spots that I'll probably have to fill for the eyebrow and the eye, but these two are all the way filled in. That makes it kind of easier to work with. But I went from those projects to kind of doing a final throw everything together with a little color and animation, and went through this last night, and this is what I came up with so far. I have something emerging from the ground down there, bursting the rocks open. Just kind of independently moved the clouds, had them layered behind each other, the sun moving behind them eventually here. Not sure what I'm going to have for a character that's coming out of the ground here, but I would like to extend the environment a bit, maybe do a little more background. Still just playing with it and learning Blender for the time being, so I'm not trying to get too detailed or too serious. There's so many mechanics to learn with this program, and so many just really cool, unique features. I've watched so many hours of videos now and have retained enough to get to this point, but I think I might start going and messing with the 3D a little bit more, maybe do the same thing here to where in about a month, maybe do a progression of the 3D, or possibly just continue with the grease pencil and see where we get with that. But it's been a lot of fun, even with the frustrations and headaches I've had trying to figure it all out. I'm kind of excited to see what all I can learn and what some of the final products I'll come up with will be. But even now, just messing around, I've got my sketch pad out. I've been trying to do some character designs, maybe some background, trying a few different styles. I've watched so much animation these last few years on Hulu, on Netflix, you name the streaming service. Animation is just in demand, and I thought it was really, it was nice to hear that Studio Ghibli and several others are going to move to Blender and start using that as one of their main animation softwares. So it's a motivating factor to learn this type of stuff right now with the amount of demand there is, and the sky is the limit. There's no limit to what you can do with some of these videos I've watched. People have obviously taken weeks and months to put things together, whereas I've just kind of done a few bits and pieces here and there. I've got to say I have a lot more respect than what I did going into this for people in the animation industry. Regardless of what their role is, like this is a huge undertaking to make a full-length feature film, voiceovers and just even the lighting and shading and all that stuff in the program here, I have not begun to touch on. I don't even know how I'd start doing voiceovers, if I'd have to render the file and then move it to the VSDC editor and do the voices there. If I can do them here, it's just not something I've even touched on yet. So still a lot to learn, and hopefully a lot more to come. So thanks for watching.